Okay, today's presentation is on Cenote Sagrado in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. It is a sacred site, or was a sacred site, of the ancient Maya people, um, and remains a tourist attraction today as part of the general area of the ancient city of Chichen Itza. Okay, so the people who believed in Cenote Sagrado were the Mayan people of the Yucatan Peninsula. Um, they considered the cenote sacred, giving rise to its name, the sacred sinkhole. Many people who worship the rain god Chak, uh, or Mayan people rather, who worship the rain god Chak, believe that he visited the cenote as well as several others throughout the Yucatan, and presumably the rivers that fed it. And the Maya were very spiritual. The ancient city of Chichen Itza was almost exclusively built to honor certain gods and their polytheistic religion. Um, Figure 2 on the left is a monument to the serpentine god Kukulkan, which is in El Castillo, the main temple of Chichen Itza. And to the right, there's a rock figurine or statue of the rain god Chak, who the Mayan believed were responsible for their sustenance through water. Ethnic or universalizing beliefs. Well, it's clear that the Maya were an ethnic culture. The current Mexican culture today is predominantly Roman Catholic, whereas the spiritual beliefs of the Maya people were polytheistic. They're closely related to those of the Aztecs, and they're not really practiced today. There are still some descendants of ancient Maya, but on the whole, Mexican culture has been universalized by the culture of the Europeans, mainly the Spanish and Portuguese explorers who settled in the region, and is predominantly Christian or Roman Catholic. Their polytheistic culture, though, remains active through tourist sites in the form of temples, which benefit the local economy through tourism. If you look at Figure 4 to the left, you'll see that the nominal GDP per capita in US dollars for 2007 is highest in the entire country in the Mexican Yucatan Peninsula at $23,130. And what this is indicative of is, of course, the widespread travel to places like Chichen Itza, Cenote Sagrado, and other historic sites that were considered sacred by the Maya people. To the right, we see the ancient city of Chichen Itza with tourists walking on a footpath. Okay, so how do cenotes form? Well, a cenote and a sinkhole are, and a collapsed cavern are all synonyms. So the way that these form, there's rainwater that flows underneath a limestone aquifer, and there is some dissolved carbon dioxide in that rainwater because water is a carbon sink. Carbon dioxide can freely dissolve in it. Um, Depending on a number of factors, temperature, pressure, but it does dissolve. And it forms carbonic acid, which can eat away at the limestone. If you look at Figure 7 to the bottom right, you'll see that there's a crack in the limestone, and that's because of an underwater river, or, uh, underwater, or under rock, rather, subterranean river, eating away at the limestone. The carbonic acid slowly, over millions of years, eats away at the limestone, and it forms a subterranean river, which you'll see in the second illustration. When that subterranean river gets big enough, a cenote forms because the land and rock above it collapse under their own weight. And what we get is seemingly a lake appearing out of nowhere, when really it's a subterranean river that's just now visible on land. But Figure 6 kind of illustrates how massive these sinkholes can become over millions of years, and just how powerful water is, even though it takes a long time for it to work its magic sometimes. So this project has personal significance to me because the Maya people, the Aztecs, and the Inca were always very interesting to me, and I never really thought that I got a good understanding of their polytheistic culture. Um, I always got a good education in Hindu culture and how polytheism shapes that culture, but I chose Cenote Sagrado because I wanted to really explore polytheism and what it meant to other regions of the world. And the other reason why I chose it is because I wanted a snapshot of what life was like before the conquest of the Europeans in ancient Mexico. Okay, so here are some images of worship at the cenote. To the left, figure 9, we see a girl being sacrificed to the water god Chak by being pushed into the cenote, and in fact, archaeologists and anthropologists have since recovered many, many skeletons from the bottom of the cenote. So this practice took place quite often. You can see the people. It seems like they're burning torches or something, standing and watching as this girl falls into the cenote. And this was actually a pretty common practice. They not only sacrificed people, but they also sacrificed jewels. There have been plenty of jewels and artifacts pulled from the cenote by archaeologists and anthropologists. And we can see on the right what probably took place before people were thrown into the cenote. You can see two men carrying a woman, and she's wearing a white dress, and you can see some sort of tribal leader holding his hand out, presumably saying that she needs to be cast into the cenote as a sacrifice to the water god Chak. And you can also see, or the rain god, you can also see many, many people in this particular illustration, which was commonplace back in the time of the ancient Maya to watch these sacrifices at the edge of the cenote. Okay, better understanding. So this project allowed me to understand the sheer importance of belief that some cultures have in multiple gods. I learned in depth in world history about Hindu culture and how they worship many, many gods. But I never really had a good appreciation of Mayan culture and how they worshipped many, many gods and how this really shaped their lives from day to day. So, water is a crucial resource which must be conserved. We see that with the current California drought. Water is pretty important, and so the fact that these people devoted a monument or a shrine to the rain god Chak is really a testament to how aware the Mayan people were, and really how strong their faith was that what they were doing was making a difference. And strong faith can make times of drought and famine and hardship much easier, because it gives the people something to believe in. And even things we now take for granted can be considered sacred by someone, like a random cenote, which probably wouldn't have much other significance had it not been next to Chichen Itza. Okay, so here are illustrations of both Chichen Itza, which includes Cenote Sagrado, or the Sacred Cenote is translated by figure 11 to your left, and the Yucatan Peninsula. So Sacred Cenote is in the sort of center top of figure 11, just past the platform of Venus, We also see El Castillo in the center. We see Temple of the Warriors on the right-hand side. In the bottom left corner, El Caracol Observatory. And in the top left corner, we see the Temple of the Jaguars and the Great Ball Court. Now, the Great Ball Court has significance for this project because it represents one of the reasons why people visited Cenote Sagrado, and that was human sacrifice to the water god Chaac. When Maya people played this ball game, whoever lost would frequently be sacrificed to the water god, or several other gods that the Maya believed in. And it's really, really interesting to me to see Chichen Itza mapped out and to see what would have taken place at the end of one of these ball games. But to the right, we see the Yucatan Peninsula. Chichen Itza is kind of in the top center, north central Yucatan. The yellow triangles represent certain temples or ancient cities of the Maya. We see Cancun in the top right, Cozumel sort of below it, Playa del Carmen, Chetumal, and Campeche on the left-hand side. Oh, and Merida on the upper left of the Yucatan. And of course, since it's a peninsula, it's surrounded on by water on three sides. We have the Gulf of Mexico to the west and the north, and we have the Caribbean Sea off to the east. Okay, question 1. How did this site come to be considered sacred? Is there anything about the physical landscape that influenced the establishment of this sacred site? Is there anything about the cultural landscape that influenced the establishment of this sacred site? So I think for this question, it's important to note that cultural landscape sort of denotes that man and his environment interact with one another. So the cultural landscape that influenced the establishment of this sacred site, yes, of course. There was strong belief in Chaac, as I said before, the rain god, and there was strong belief that this cenote in the ancient Mayan city of Chichen Itza was sacred. It came to be considered sacred probably because the summers in the Yucatan Peninsula are very unforgiving. They're very hot, they're very humid, dehydration would set in very quickly, and this was a place that, to the ancient Maya, we find sinkholes pretty innocuous, but to the ancient Maya was magic. How could there be this mysterious lake that just appeared out of nowhere when the land gave way? And again, this goes back to a lack of understanding in science, yes, but also goes back to the Maya's strong faith, and they considered this site sacred because they thought that Chaac had provided them a gift. So even though they didn't really understand the science, it's still an important site and important culturally to understand the Mayans' belief system. Okay, question 2. How does the geographic type of religion account for the development of this sacred site? Well, as I said, there are intense human-environmental interactions here. The Mayans' religion was heavily influenced by nature. We see that with Kukulkan, which is a snake-like god. I believe the Maya also had a sun god. We see it with Chaac, the rain god. And I showed Kukulkan and Chaac's pictures in previous slides, but the geographic type of religion is the Mayan religion. I mean, there's no real part of the religion that doesn't involve nature, and it logically follows that such a sacred site as Cenote Sagrado would be born out of such a religion because of the unforgiving weather conditions and the religion's deep commitment to nature. Okay, question 3. Is there any conflict associated with this site? I did not see much conflict. I'm sure some people were not thrilled about being sacrificed to the water gods or any of the other gods that the Maya believed in. But I don't believe that this site was the site of any war or the site of any conflict or battle. I didn't see any evidence of that. What I did see was strong evidence of human sacrifice, and that was a big part of the Mayan culture. And so I'm sure some people were not happy about that, but I did not see much conflict associated with Cenote Sagrado or Chichen Itza. Okay, what impact does this site have upon the nearby physical and cultural landscapes and vice versa? Well, I touched on the cultural landscape before. Physical landscape, I would say that, this site represented life to the ancient Maya because, of course, you can only live 24 hours without water and probably less in such a humid and unforgiving place as the Yucatan Peninsula. Tropical Mexico is not a place where you'd want to be caught without water or without clean water. But this site, there's no doubt that this site has both physical and cultural importance to the landscape. Certainly, I'm sure several animals make use of Cenote Sagrado even today. And there's no doubt great implications for the hydrologic cycle, as well as for any of the marine life, aquatic plants that live in the cenote, and any sort of amphibians or reptiles that live in there. So it has both cultural significance and physical significance. Okay, yes, this is the last question. Question 5. How does the site itself, not the practices at the site, represent the beliefs of the people in the group? Well, I've touched on this multiple times. The belief that sacrifices must be made to the water god Chak was very important for this site. It says not the practices at the site, but the site itself really can't be separated from the practices. The site itself is probably the best way to answer this question is the site itself is sort of the manifestation of Chak's power. I would imagine that the collection of rainwater in the cenote, as well as in the underwater river that fed the cenote and presumably continues to feed it, is indicative of Chak's power. Represents, Chak's might and Chak's benevolence for the people of the Mayan region, and that's really sort of an interesting take, but I think that's probably the best way to answer this question. Excuse me. Okay, so here are the references for all the photographs that I used. And I'd like to thank you for listening.